And we'll just do a sound check. What did you think of our new kestrel cricket?
I was very interested in how calm the birds seemed to be with all those people. Now, we were quiet, but we were a lot of new faces to that little bird. And he was eating and just, eating his little treats and stayed very calm on her hand, I thought like. Pretty little cuss. I mean, we've seen him, but not that close, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
No, that was great. And when we get another one or two here, it's going to be really nice, I think.
Mm-hmm. So go ahead.
Hi, everybody. This is Larry Brown. I've been involved with Audubon since the summer of, 1971, when I first arrived in town with a new job. It was my fourth step up the ladder in the USDA, and I had planned this was going to be my career, and it has been, and it is. It's worked out very nicely for my family and myself. And my surprise, when I got involved with Audubon, I was mowing my lawn one day, and Gabe Burgess came by and introduced himself to me, and it all took off from there. He says, "Here, we'd like to have you as a member of Audubon while you're working down here with us." So that was a nice introduction to Audubon. And I've been working with Buildings and Grounds ever since that time. We had a little incident this last January, of all times of the year, we're going to tell you this one, where we were out working. We have found some winterberry holly plants on the property lately. They have the most beautiful red berries in the fall, and they hang on to about midwinter, and all of a sudden it seems like all the birds found it at the same time, and they're gone. They're just gone that fast. While we were removing competing brush and a little tree around some of these plants, Carol and Joe and I, my two helpers, and I tell you, they are really great people. They've been with me now for a couple, 3 years, and Terry just let them go with me, and we really know, they know their way around, and can operate without me if I have to be some days. So it's working out very, very well. Anyway, we were removing brush from around this clump of winterberry holly, and think nothing about it. Even it was in January, so we weren't concerned about poison ivy, a hint of what's coming. We worked that day, and we had found a tree, 7, 8 inches in diameter, and right in the middle of where this patch was, so it had to go. And we were cutting this tree down, and Joe likes to use the chainsaw, and that's great. So anyway, we had it all cut up and moved, and we went home. And all of a sudden I started to itch. Little be known to me, Carol and Joe, we're starting to itch also. Oh my gosh. And I didn't know this for a couple, 3 days afterwards. And Carol called up and said, "You know what?" And I said, "What?" "I'm going to listen." She said, "I got poison ivy." And I said, "You know what? I got it too." And she says, "I had it so bad I had to go down to the emergency room and get a shot." Oh my gosh, come on. "Yeah," she says, "I did." Well, I was using the old pink ointment from years ago, and it was an old bottle, and it wasn't working very well, and I kept it under control, but I wasn't getting rid of it. I finally had to call my doctor up, and he got me into some ointment that I can't even pronounce it. And I remember even mine trying to spell it, and it helped. It got rid of it. But the other year, in the middle of winter, he says, "What are you doing with poison ivy in the middle of winter?" My physician says to me. I said, "Well, it's a long story." Anyway, that was a pretty good one. But the three of us, all the same time, the same day, we had a chuckle over it. We all recovered, of course, quite easily. But it did take longer to recover than I thought. Seemed to spread. Carol says, Carol, by the way, is a retired nurse. And she really takes good care of us. And she's got us out of more than one bind before. And says eventually it took care of itself. But boy, she says it gets into your blood system, gets into your circulatory system, and you're going to have a little outbreak of it here and there, and there's nothing to show for it. And she was very right. But anyway, that's over and done with. I think we'll probably be more careful. When the leaves are not on the poison ivy plant and it's on the trunk of a tree, you don't even know it's there hardly. Well, we certainly going to look for it from now on anyway. End of story.
Especially when you're focused on getting a job done.
Especially, it was just a start. It was our second day we were doing this process. Anyway, by the time we got all done, the birds were cleaning the berries all off the bushes, so now we got to wait until, I guess what we're going to do, put it on our spring blossoming list. When the apple trees are in blossom, we'll take a check and see if these things are in blossom, and then we'll mark them so we know where we're going for next off-season work.
Yeah, winterberry holly is a really nice winter food source for birds.
Apparently, they really go for it too. Amongst the other fruit that's left on apple trees, crab apple trees around here, they were planted by the original people that were started this organization, because the trees are ancient now for crab apple trees. But boy, they produce the little apples and they hang on, and more than once, and they're all in a row in one place in the Arboretum, and that's the only place they are, in this one row where they were planted there, and they bear fruit yet. Way back, how many years ago now has it been? Quite a few. And the birds, migratory birds come in, and the robins were in there way late for robin time. You'd think they were feeding on those birds and on those trees, and those apples were disappearing, and you could just stand there and watch them. And another time, it wasn't a cardinal. It was another migratory bird that was in there and found those crab apples, and they were just all through the I'll think of it eventually. So it's interesting how they find these two trees on the whole property, but they knew where they were anyway. So
yeah, were the crab apples originally planted for wildlife?
I think so.
Food?
Because they're all in a row, all out here on the eastern part, which is on the west part of the property, which is the original piece of property. And this place has been expanded about 3 times that I can remember. Looking along Route 62 edge over that way, and up north of us, but on that side of the property, had been expanded over time. And so there's interesting things that were on parts of farms that are now part of this property.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what you did for USDA on this property? Because you mentioned you were working down here before you were asked to become a member and then volunteered.
Yes. Well, it all happened within about my first time here, until I was asked if I would like to become a member, and had a nice visit that day. That whole thing took just a very short time. They had taken out the beaver dam for a big pond. At that time, we, through USDA, was able to get money from the Department of Interior, Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Game, for special projects, community type projects. So we not only got contractor, but got funding to tear out the old beaver dam, because it had to go, obviously. Then construct, like we would on any property, a dike to hold the water back. Or there's a little side hill pond for livestock water on the dairy farm, which we did a lot of, or recreational pond for people to have a summer camp. And a lot of that went on, particularly in Cattaraugus County, where I started out a long time ago. That was where those were. Anyway, these ponds are to make an earthen dike and to put in an emergency spillway and the regular drain pipe in the middle to hold the regular water level. So it was the length of that dike on Big Pond is much more than we usually would do to make a pond on a farm. But Department of Fish and Wildlife Service funded that through us. So that was a great thing for Audubon to have. And since then, they wanted us little potholes. We had the 3 major ponds, and then they fed into big pond. Mm-hmm. Everything drains into big pond around here. No matter what you do, this property, it drains to the north. Chautauqua River runs to the south, which is an interesting situation. There's no downhill slope because you're going, the valley goes one way and the Klondike's on the opposite way, which is a little unique in itself. But it's very level, and that's why it happens.
So the big Klondike that you built, is that like in the 1970?
Yes. It was late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is what we walk across today.
Yes, right is. And although that dike, you go in there now or most times of the year, and it's the outlet pipe goes into a little flowage which goes into the Conowano, not very far from where the dike ends. There's a little short stream, if you will, leads into the Conowano. And the overflow pipe dumps that way. When you have, backtrack just a minute, all the water from here comes from Kyntone. Mm-hmm. Up on the hill is a little hamlet of Kyntone, where a stream starts just west of there and comes towards Audubon, around that hamlet and down the hill and through a couple of good big farms, and finally ends up in Audubon property in 2 places. So all our drainage comes way up on top of the hill. So the watershed is not that extensive, but it's steep. So the runoff is fast and it's quick and it's over with. So the big pond takes all the water from the hill and the water from the property. It can fluctuate over the course of the year considerably in elevation. We got out on Big Pond when the Conowano is using its spring runoff from snow melt and so forth, and the water can be knee deep over the top of the dike. Mm. And you gotta be careful because there's some velocity to that water. It's flowing pretty fast. It's not a good place to be at that point. But the dike was built as according to specification, well sodded, and it's held up very, very nicely over these years.
It has. I mean, it's over 50 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then back to the little potholes again. Between the other little ponds that drain one to the other, there was wetlands because in that area, and we excavated out small areas called little potholes. No dike, just a little excavation, and the water, the high water from the ponds goes into these potholes and then out. And must be at least a half a dozen, probably more than that, scattered between the existing ponds. So there's quite a lot of aquatic type growth and birds and ducks and so on and so forth, all these little ponds. And it's the children love to get in those with their dip nets because it's not very deep and it's a relatively safe spot to be and see what aquatic life is in these little ponds, and there's a lot of it. So that was most of the work that we had done was that type of work.
Yeah.
The very last thing I did down here as a project before I retired was to build a pond that's outside the back door of the building. That was the last project that we had attempted.
Oh, what we call the backyard pond or observation pond sometimes.
Observation pond back there, where the and that drains into what we did. We put from the pond behind the building. We put a pipe under the trail into this new area, and so the high water comes up the pipe and fills this pond behind the building. And it's so flat and level back there, you could put water about anywhere up to 2 months.
Yeah.
Because it's so flat. And this was what.
So backyard pond, created it. Did you also build the paved trail at the same time as backyard pond? Because it kind of goes underneath the paved trail. Through the backyard?
I don't know. remember that too much about
Okay.
that one.
Maybe not then.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my last professional job on the job down there. And then at that time, there was, we were going through, Audubon was going through quite a growth period in there as far as membership goes. And this building we're in now was built then. Roger Tory Peterson was here for that building dedication. And it was really a big, tremendous step upward when this structure we now set in today was built.
That was in the early 90s
Yes.
when the addition was put onto the original building. And Roger Tory Peterson was here for a dedication of that building.
Then when we were, at that time, the A-frame was up early on, along with this original building up on the hill here. And then the big addition was added onto it. And then, so that set for a while. Then the early days of the Buildings and Grounds crew were quite basic. Like there was a single pitch roof shed with a workbench in it and one electric light bulb hanging down. An earthen floor, which would freeze in the wintertime and you couldn't get the doors open. It was really about as basic as you could get. The equipment was inside, but there wasn't much of a place to work, obviously. So the idea came to really put up a maintenance building. Let's really do a job. So one year we went and we cut down a few trees, and that was almost the end of my life down here because that was not accepted at that time. But anyway,
it wasn't what at the time?
We had to do it in order to put the building up.
Oh.
The new maintenance building was on an idle area, let's say at that point. So what would we got it smoothed off. Contractor came in, poured the concrete floor, and put the post up to put a roof over it. So what we had when they left was a huge picnic shelter, about what it amounted to. And we took it from there. And there was only about 8 of us on this crew at that time. And we were always still working. Saturday mornings. 2 Saturday mornings a month for 2 years. We came down here and put that maintenance building up.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really, and we had some good carpenters, excellent carpenters, I should say.
Do you remember who was part of that?
Hugh Wood and myself. Hugh Wood was the conservation education teacher at BOCES. Mm-hmm. And I had put on classes for his students, so we had known each other for a while. And all of a sudden we were both retired. And he came down and was the chairman of our little crew, and he was good in construction, and we put this up. And as I say, and then there's a dedication plaque on the wall inside the maintenance building that talks a little bit about the date that we had the grand acceptance, and it was a great place to work. It is still a great place to work. We've had drill presses and saws given to us by people over the years, along with the rest of the tools that we have in there. And the tractor had to sit outside. Now went from 1 tractor to 4, 2 lawnmowers for one thing. There's a lot more grass than there used to be down here right now. But the area behind the building was on the verge of being a wetland. It was so close that we had a little help in there from DEC to check it to see we weren't going to get ourselves in trouble.
Yeah.
It was very close to being a wetland. And then they said, oh, we got to have somebody from the Nation of Indians come down and check that for artifacts, because this was a heavy artifact area down here. And they didn't find anything, which was good for us. Before we could even built the back lawn from the pond, excavation of the pond back here. So the back lawn was built up and seeded down like as it is today. Mm-hmm. So this whole thing was going on at once, both the lawn and the maintenance building. And so we went from 1 lawnmower to 2 lawnmowers, and we got the couple of tractors going, and now the work crew was working here about 3 days a week now anyway.
Yeah.
And there's 10, 12 people on it, guys and gals and everybody, mostly retired people, obviously, but from all kinds of skill levels, and which makes it really great. We've had plumbers and we've had electricians, and we got them now and then, some people like myself that work with the plants and so forth. So it's really running, and the school buses come in here now. Oh my gosh! Before this COVID did this, all took us all by surprise, slowed us right down for a while, for a considerable length of time, I would say. But when you see the school buses come running in here one after another, and these kids are so excited, it makes you feel good.
Makes it worth it.
Yes.
Makes getting poison ivy worth it.
Yeah, I guess you'll learn by doing, huh?
and 2 years of building a building.
It took us a couple of years, yes, just on Saturday. And it looked like a huge picnic shelter when we started. So we had quite a ways to go.
Yeah, wow. You have put a lot of work into Audubon. So in addition to the natural resources, you are one of, I think, the great human resources that Audubon has.
Well, there was a bunch. There's some of us still around.
Oh, there are a lot of great human resources.
Oh, yes. And it's nice to see this Carol Samuelson that works with me now. I mean, she's a retired nurse, And Joe O'Hara, who's been with me now for a couple, 3 years, was with USDA like I was, but he was a meat inspector. Well, now how far can you get from Audubon from a meat inspector, But he has lots of time at home with plants and trees and shrubs. So that's where that fit in. And Carol and her husband own a piece of woodland, and they also work on the trail system for the county up there where they live. So she's, might be nervous. She's had a lot of plant background as well. So they are, the two of them and myself, we can take care about. Well, we've only been together now for several years, 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
No, you're like the Three Musketeers.
Yeah, it's been good. But this incident with poison ivy, we won't forget because the three of us.
Well, I'm glad that everybody healed and you had a good laugh out of it eventually.
And we did it to ourselves.
Yeah, and you came back. Oh, well, thanks, Larry, for.
Well, this has been enjoyable.
For sharing again.
I'm glad to have the opportunity.
Excellent.
To have it recorded. So.
Well, if you think of anything else.
I think we covered it pretty darn
all right.
Well.
I'm gonna want to root through our old slides and photos, and I wonder if there's photos of that Big Pond Dike being built and the maintenance building. I'm sure there are.
I've seen them somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's photos.
All right.
I don't know, I'm trying to think of who was the big picture taker in the past. Oh, isn't that awful? Retired not long ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Sometimes I can't.
Who worked here?
Yeah.
Jennifer Schlick?
Jennifer.
Yeah.
She was a photographer.
Yeah. And she was there. She's been at Audubon for
a
long time. Yeah.
We get heading out where she'd hop on her trailer and she'd go out with us. So, yes, that's very true.
Yeah. All right. We're going to press stop. All right. So I am here with Larry Brown on May 15th, 2021. And Larry, your warm-up question. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grow up?
Well, now that's interesting because my grandfather and my father both had very large gardens during the war, World War II. It's almost the size of an extra building lot. And I got into gardening a long time ago. And I get into growing things. And now here we're doing a lot of growing on the Audubon over the years. And that just fit right in, seems to me. And I just kept the interest up.
All right. Larry, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Well, let me see. I had my wheat cereal and half a banana, and then I had my hot chocolate, and I had a couple of pieces of toast, and I had a little jelly on me even today.
All right. Can you state your name and your connection with Audubon?
Larry Brown. I have been a member. I worked down at Audubon on my career job, which is a little unique from some people. And then after that point, I've already been down here for several years doing projects as part of my career work with the USDA. And then I said, well, and then I went sat down by a ag teacher from BOCES, and Hugh Wood and myself sat down and began to think about this group that we have now is the owls, as we call ourselves. And we met with Jim Yike, who was the first director, really, of Audubon, and developed into what became eventually the Buildings and Grounds crew. Only 6 of us, and we put up that shop. The maintenance building took 2 years of Saturday mornings. Our wives blessed us. It was a tough fight to get started, but the first and third Saturdays of every month for 2 years we were down here. We went from an outdoor picnic pavilion, was about what it looked like when the contractors left, to the completed maintenance building as we know of it now. And we were really proud to be able to do that.
So did you do that after you retired from USDA?
No.
Oh.
We were all still on the job. All of us. Well, 6 of us. We were all still working full time.
Wow. So how did you start volunteering at Audubon? Sounds like it was like an easy transfer because you were already.
It was interesting. We moved in here in July of '71, 2 years ago, and we had the office at the Ag Center had a tour down here to show what they had done with the beaver pond to the big pond dike, and that whole area back there. And that was my first trip here, and we met some of the original founders of Audubon down here that day. And I was back down for another job. And one night at home, I was mowing the lawn, and along comes Gilbert Burgesson. And he knew of me. He said, I know of you. He says, would you please like to join Audubon? We'd love to have you as a member. I thought, well, now this is kind of nice. Sure. So I did, and that's how the whole thing started.
So who is Gilbert Burgesson?
One of the founders of Audubon. One of the original gentlemen of Audubon. Great guy. His favorite saying was, I'm going to take you on a nature walk, not a hike. On a hike, you're off in the distance and you're going somewhere with a definite spot in mind. In Nature Center, you're just going on and looking at seeing what happens. Where we end up. And that was his philosophy on taking nature walks. Great guy.
So describe like what Audubon looked like in terms of the grounds, the building, the people when you first started getting involved in 1971?
Right.
Okay, so.
Well, the building was a little log house up on the hill where we sit now. That was all there was. And then the A-frame was brand new at that point. Those 2 structures were here, but this, where we are now, we're in a small part of what was eventually end up being a nature center as we know it today. Maintenance shop was the lowest shed, as I said, with a slanted roof, and that was about it. Some equipment had to be stored outdoors because there was no room inside for anything other than a tractor up in the A-frame, and then some equipment out in the shed. The shed had an earthen floor. It had a workbench with 1 light bulb hanging on, and that was about how the whole thing started. And look what we have today. It's pretty amazing.
It is. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, and you kind of already started kind of going down that road, but like, what are the big things for you that have changed over the years?
Well, it was there was the staff was pretty darn small. There was Jim Yike and and he was the director. And there was one custodian and probably a schoolboy, and then there was that was about it. And then there was the slow growth of the field crew ourselves. Slow growth of that. The acreage wasn't as extensive as it was now. It was 2 pieces or 3 pieces of land bought on along Route 62 out here, added to the north each time. And so that made it possible to go all the way around Big Pond, because you couldn't before, because we didn't own that over there before. So that was added on. And so and then we have one little, several 100-foot section that we're on Route 60 parallel to. But other than that, it's not. It's all off the highway.
You're a story person, because I've heard that today. So are there any kind of memorable or funny stories that come to mind from those early days of working down here and volunteering?
We had a great time when there were just the 6 of us out there working on this building, because a lot of us had never done much construction type work before, but a couple of us had. There was a great learning process, and it was just, we're a pretty formal group now with as many people as we got, all the equipment we have to function pretty darn tight to schedule to keep everybody doing something that they like to do. And so in other words, that's when they're going to stay here. So we keep this in mind as people come on. And Carol Samuelson, who I talked about today, came along. Her husband was a forester, and they own a little wood lot that they keep track of themselves. So she was no rookie when it came to growing things. And they even had a little cold frame at home, how they grew some of their own tree seedlings even. So she just hopped right on. Carol's been working with me now for about 5 or 6 years. And I can just turn her loose, and I know that she's going to end up with a good product. So it's been great to have. And Ed Yeager and I, we put in a lot of time getting these birdhouses built for all these spring days that we had with the kids, and it was interesting.
So you had referred to Carol, who you talked about earlier, just for people who are going to listen to this. We're talking right after the volunteer appreciation picnic. And so do you mind talking a little bit more about Carol? Because she's kind of your mentee in the Arboretum.
No. And I know if something happened to me, God forbid, something happened to me, she could take over and run it. And that was my goal when I first went, after about a year with her here.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I'm not here, she says, I got this done here or gone there, and I got that done here or gone there. And Joe O'Hara has been with me now for a couple of years now. And Joe and I can work great together. He can go on his own and do some jobs now. So I think it's made it really easy for me to say that, okay, things are a little bit more difficult for me to do now physically, perhaps, but those two can handle it just fine. And I have them go together without me some days. And that's working out great. So thinking ahead, I think we're going to be in good hands.
That's a pretty nice legacy, Larry.
Well, I appreciate being able to let it fly.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add about when you knew you were going to come here and we were going to start this Story Corner project? What kinds of things were you thinking about?
Well, Tina asked me quite a while ago if I could make a comment or two at the recognition function. I said, oh, sure. I said, it's nice to get awards, and I have gotten them my share in the past, but it's also nice to contribute verbally a little bit about how your feelings are, which I won't say it's been neglected. That's not the right word to say it, but I haven't had the opportunity, let's say, to do what we've been doing today. I'm very pleased to be asked, and very pleased to be able to do it, because I like to have it known.
Well, it sounds like we're going to have to do this again, Because I think you have a lot more stories.
Well, that's the highlights. I could go into individual projects would be the only other thing that we didn't get into too deeply today. And that varies for the seasons. And this carp business I didn't tell it today because maybe it's not quite proper, maybe, but I want to tell it sometime.
Well, tell it right now.
Okay.
What's the deal with the carp?
The deal with the carp is when this big pond is drawn down in the fall to the other ponds to take care of any heavy winter runoff, snow melt and ice and snow and so forth. And then in the spring, we put the top logs back in the water control boxes and bring them back up. Sometimes, if we have a real lot of snowfall in this watershed above us, all the way to Cherry Creek and up to the Colorado, all ends up down here. Water goes over the top of the dam into the pond from the river. Now this, it's knee deep or more over the top of the dike, flowing into the pond and bringing what knows with it. Anything that's in the water, like going to fish, likewise, going to bring with them. And that's how the carp got in here in the first place. And they're terrific spawners, and they keep the pond muddied up, big pond muddied up because they're bottom feeders. And so our effort was trying to reduce this population. It's getting out of control. So what we did, we drew all the bores out of the big pond water control structure to drop the water level as low as they can drop it. And it was amazing when they get it down that low that there is really a stream flow into Big Pond. And it was a creek area at one time. You can see where the stream bottom was and is when you drop the water down. It's an interesting sight. Anyway, the carp were contained then down near the dam. I asked for some help, and they weren't sure what they wanted to or not, but they agreed to. So we went in there and we got a flat bottom john boat, 2-seater. And then we got our oldest clothes on we could find, shoes and all. And we got 2 long handled nets. Now we haven't got much of a pool in Big Pond. It's not a pond, it's a pool. And we put the boat in and we began netting these carp. Well, let me tell you, that was a circus. The boat was full of carp on the bottom. They're flashing around on our feet. And we got enough. We said to the guys on shore, pull us out of here. We've had enough, So they pull us out, and we take the boat up on the dike. Quite a few guys can pull a boat full of carp, dump it over the side, and let the carp go down the outside of the dike into this outlet pond. That's at the base of the dam. So that's working, but about two times the piece of that. Everybody had enough. But there was a tremendous amount of carp come out of that pond that day. And Jennifer was there with her camera taking pictures. And this was done on a Thursday. Tuesday, Jennifer was down and we met together. She said, Larry, I remember those 2 fish that didn't look like they were going to make it. And we left them out on the bank. I said, oh, yeah. They were gone the next morning, she said. Something came in and took those carp and had a real feast. So we didn't waste a thing. But we kind of chuckle over that.
And this is Jennifer Schleck.
This is Jennifer Schleck. So the whole story, that incident was one of the most ripper dippers down here that we had pulled off before. Now, what we do for carp management is really good. Just leave those boards in the spring. Leave the water level up until it's up in the grass. Along comes about April, the carp go up into that grass. It's in the water then. You can see the plants moving around, lay their eggs, and then when we do not see them in the grass anymore, we drop the water and dry all the eggs up. And that is really the cleanest, easiest way to manage the whole situation.
I can't imagine being in a boat full of carp. How many carp do you think were in that boat, and how big were the carp?
Oh, the carp are going to go 24, 30 inches long. They're good-sized fish. Oh, we get 8 or 10 in a boat. That's probably about enough. Then we yank them out and dump them out and start over again.
And I'm assuming they're moving around.
Oh, they're jumping on your feet and everything else,
And probably not smelling well.
That's what they went on. It didn't get any better, no.
maybe not appropriate to tell right before lunch.
No, not appropriate today, but that's what life's all about anyway. So.
Yeah, those those fun times where you do messy jobs in your old clothes.
That's good. And of all the things that I thought about the last 2 days after talking to her was that kept coming up. I thought, I really can't do that. That's Saturday afternoon. I really got to wait till it's up. And this opportunity comes along. It's amazing.
The carp story is recorded for perpetuity, or in perpetuity. The other thing I was wondering about is when you worked for USDA, you said you worked down here first before you started volunteering.
Yeah.
What kind of work did you do for USDA down here?
We had the ponds were built, but these little potholes were not.
All the little tiny ponds around Audubon.
Most people have to know them around whatever there are. So we were locating those and getting those situated.
Mm-hmm.
That was the main thing. We did a little bit back stabilization between these new ponds because they needed some vegetation and so forth on, and we worked on that a little bit. And then after that, let me see. We didn't do much in the Arboretum, and I just had met the founder of the Arboretum and a couple other people from the Forest Service. I had just met them, so I didn't really. I knew who they were and what they'd been done, but I hadn't been there much before.
But you said all the ponds were built at Audubon. Are any of them natural, or are they all human constructed?
The big pond was a beaver pond a long, long time ago, but the dike was not as long as it is now. There wasn't much water in it as there was with all this vegetation at this time of year. It was in the same spot, but it wasn't nearly the length or size of the water area. It wasn't nearly that big. It's interesting that all these ponds, the little potholes, if they get too big, they'll overflow into the existing ponds, Turtle East, Turtle West, Island Pond, and so forth. They all end up in Big Pond, which is interesting in itself. They all come off the Kindtone village or hamlet of Kindtone watershed, all the way on the hill and into the ponds and go from one pond to the other pond, and then eventually they all empty into Big Pond. So it's a pretty interesting situation, really.
So, which Big Pond eventually empties into the Conowongo, right. And sometimes the Conowongo empties into Big Pond when it floods.
It has worked both ways.
So, what do you do to build a pond? Because that's not something that is permitted in today's rules and regulations as much.
Anything. I'm not gonna. I should probably throw these figures out, but it's something like over a half-acre water surface has to go through a permit process, and it's somewhere like that. So a lot of our so-called farm ponds, which we built forever, were less than a quarter of an acre. They were mainly for livestock water, or they're mainly for lately in my career, we were doing milk waste runoff ponds for the milk waste, but wouldn't go into the dishes and into the creeks. And so some of those ponds were for that. And you'd be surprised what rainfall and Mother Nature can do to even milk waste. It cleans it right up after a while. And so instead of going out into the road dishes or whatever.
It's like excess milk from dairy farms.
Not to get too technical about barnyard runoff, but it can be pretty bad. And we did a lot of water quality work in the last few years. When we started out with USDA, it started after the big dust storm in the 1920s. A dust storm came almost into Chicago from the west. It was really a terrible situation. And we were founded, USDA was founded, Soil Conservation Service was founded then, and did all that planting of windbreaks out in the west. And you look at a photograph now out there of those intense cropped areas, and every farmstead is just lined with trees on the outside, completely enclosed with vegetation for wind protection to even to the farmsteads. And then it tend to grow. And when I joined, I was just out of the Coast Guard, and I went to Cornell, out of Cornell into the Coast Guard, out of the Coast Guard, and I went in the office and checked with these guys, and they said they have any experiences. Well, I worked on a farm while I was in college, and they were doing a tile drainage job. Well, that was pretty good. And so I was offered the position, and I stayed right with it from, oh my gosh, I don't know how, now we're getting too far back to remember now. 57, 61, 1961, I guess it was, I went to the Coast Guard. And then out in 4 years, and went with USDA, and it changed a little bit. In the 1990s, I retired in 2000, something like that. It was changed to the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And I think that title was probably lacking for years in it, other than just soil conservation, because we were doing air quality, barnyards next to villages, huge farmsteads next to villages. Air pollution was even a concern, and water pollution and barnyard runoff and on and on. And did a lot of stream bank protection work with rock. Some plant materials like willows, shrub willows, not the tree willows, shrub willows on the shore banks of the shore, and rock, rip rock that they call it, to protect road banks, particularly around bridges and things like that. And we were doing all that kind of work, so it was far from just plain farm work as the years went on.
You have a long history of working in the natural world. So I think it's how fortunate that you were able to use your experience in USDA to do that work at Audubon and bring those skills.
It's been great. I mean, I do have a garden at home. I love to go fishing, but I always had time. And before the pandemic, we were down there Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, whether we're going to get back to that or not, I don't know, but that's where we were. So it was 2 days a week.
Yeah.
For many, 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 many years. And then, of course, we backed off a year ago, March. And we didn't even come down here for 2 months, my gosh. And when we came back, it was 1 day a week. And we just stuck to that here and there. We got more people than we ever have had. Number one, went from about 4 or 5 people to, I think it was like 18 here sometimes when we were a few years ago. I mean, when we were on 2 days a week. Tremendous number of people.
Yeah, as part of the Owls volunteer group.
Yeah.
It takes care of the buildings and grounds. Yeah. So, Larry, thank you.
Well, it's been great. I thought about today. I had thought about possibly having something like to have this done somehow, somewhere, knowing that we've lost some from other people.
Yeah.
Just as you mentioned. So I think this has been. I couldn't be more pleased to be able to do this. To tell you the truth today.
That's awesome. I'm glad you were our first person to interview.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. And I think we're going to have to get you in here again.
Well, if I come up with any overlooks at the moment, I think we're pretty good covered, but something will come up. I said, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Why didn't I say that? Well, if I do, I'll let you know.
All right. Thank you.